So welcome to Kagyu Samyuzang Edinburgh. Whether you're in the room or online, it's good that you're tuning in wherever you are. And so today's talk is about, it's called Timeless Dharma for our times, but it's also about being a Buddhist in the 21st century. But before we start with that, let's start with our introductory prayers. So the first one that we do is the refuge prayer to the Buddha. And I'll say that in English once, and then we'll repeat it in the Tibetan phonetics, and we can say it twice, so then that makes it 3 times in all. So we're, taking refuge with the Buddha. And then the prayer underneath that, I'll say it once in English, so we know what we're saying, and then we'll say it once in the Tibetan phonetics. Okay? In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the noblest Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. Through the virtue generated by the practice of generosity and other virtues, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. Sanjay cho tang suji cho nam la, chang cho pardu dani chap sunji, dagi jin soji pe sonam ji, dola penchir sanjay ra parsho, sanjay cho tang suji cho nam la, chang cho pardu dani chap sunji, Dagi jin soji pe sonamji, dola penche sanjira parsho. May all beings have happiness and create the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and from creating the causes of suffering. May they find that noble happiness that can never be tainted by suffering. May they attain universal, impartial compassion, beyond worldly bias towards friends or enemies. Sam chen tam che dewa tang, dewe je tang dempar je chik, dunyal tang dunyal chi je tan rawar je chik, dunyal me pe dewa tam pa tang min rawar je chik, Niring chadang tang trawe tang nyam chempola ne parjorchi. Okay, so you won't be needing the prayers for now, so if you want to put them on the chair next to you, or but not on the floor, please. So on the chair behind, wherever there's a space, or on a table. Thank you. So the reason I thought I would give this talk is because people might wonder, you might wonder, if the Buddha's teachings are relevant in our time today. The time when the Buddha was living 2,500 years ago is very different, isn't it? The civilization was completely different. And what we're experiencing now in the 21st century is obviously not what he would have experienced in that way. So we might ask, well, is it relevant to are those teachings relevant to our present day lives? So the Buddha gave many thousands of teachings, because he would give teachings to whoever he met and who in the way that would benefit them the most. So that's why there's so many thousands of them, because they were to suit each individual. Not everybody's the same. Not everybody has the same intellect or experience or kind of education, so that's why there's many, many teachings. And we don't need to know them all, of course not. We need to follow what's relevant for us. But some of the teachings that he gave, like, for example, the first teaching that he gave after he became enlightened, we call it the Four Noble Truths. It was the teachings he gave after he became enlightened under the Bodhi tree, and he was thinking, well, how can I share this knowledge, this enlightenment, this wisdom that I've come to realize? How can I express it and share it with people? Because I don't know that they would understand it, But the first people that he gave the teachings to were the 5 ascetics who he'd studied with before, and who were quite, evolved, spiritually evolved. So they would be quite capable of understanding. Maybe not fully, but at least partly. So these 4 noble truths are what he taught to them. And the very first teachings are, actually, they contain everything. If we understand them well enough, they're kind of very succinct, have all the teachings that come after, are contained within them. So we're going to look at those teachings, and then we're going to see how they apply to our lives today, if they do and how they do. So the first noble truth is the understanding, the realization that this world is full of suffering. I mean, we don't have to look very far to see suffering now as much as it was ever. Maybe more, who knows? Maybe different, certainly, but definitely we can say there's a lot of suffering in the world, can't we? No? So some of them are kind of always happening, like almost eternal, because there's the general sufferings that we as human beings might, or any living being might experience, is birth, the suffering of being born, of age, and sickness, and death. So that happens whenever you're born, isn't it? Whichever century you're born in, definitely that's your lifespan. We'll have that kind of sufferings attached to those events in your life. But then there's also global sufferings, more specific sufferings that might apply more to one civilization more than another. So let's take some examples. For example, in terms of illness, so the illnesses that we suffer now are maybe somewhat different to the ones in the Buddha's time. Some of them will be the same. I mean, I think in those days, thousands of years ago, there was a lot of leprosy. Probably still is leprosy in some parts of the world, but it's not as rampant as it used to be, because modern medicine has been able to work wonders with things like that. Or even something like rickets. People used to have rickets. It was quite a common disease. Now a lot of people wouldn't even know what rickets are. But then again, the illnesses that we have these days, perhaps they didn't have so much then. Like cancer, very prevalent now, isn't it? And diabetes. Or something like anorexia. I very much doubt there was anorexia in the time of the Buddha, somehow. I think these are quite modern diseases. But they're still diseases, and we still suffer. Or if we look at the way we live our lives, for example, our transport. So maybe in the time of the Buddha, you would ride a horse, or maybe you'd have a cart or a chariot, and if you had an accident with that, then you could maybe crash your chariot or something like that, fall off a horse. Now you're more likely to fall off a bike or have a car crash, or even a plane crash, so you have a big mass accident of a lot of people at once. But you're still having accidents or injuring yourself, isn't it? You're still suffering from transport-related sufferings, you could say. Then if you think not just only on an individual level, but if you think on a more global level, so one of the main ways that we suffer in this world in a global sense is through war. And in the days of the Buddha, there was certainly war. One kingdom will wage war against another kingdom. And they would use probably many bows and arrows, maybe battering rams, something like that, to kill each other. Nowadays, we don't really do that. We have more, well, actually we do still that a bit, but mainly what we would use to harm each other would be guns or bombs, drones. You can kill thousands of people, can't you, just with pressing a button, and then a plane will take up and drop a bomb, and then thousands and thousands of people are killed without it going into battle even. So the way we have war is very different and mega scale. But definitely it causes suffering, and much more so. So just by looking at examples like these, we can see that this first noble truth of that this life is full of suffering, and that's just a few examples. But we can very definitely see that truth is still relevant, it still holds. It's only the outer manifestations that differ according to the time and the type of civilization, or where you are and when you lived. But basically, the truth is still the truth, isn't it? It's still worldly suffering. So then we come to the second noble truth, which is, okay, so what are the causes of suffering? What are the root causes of it? Why does this happen? Whether we suffer and how we experience it depends on our state of mind. And this is what the Buddha went into in great depth. You see, I think with modern civilization, all our advances tend to be looking outwards at how we can improve life outwardly, but we don't often look at the root causes, and we don't know very much about the mind, still, even now. But the Buddha, that was where he did put his efforts, because he realized that everything that we experience in life, we experience through our mind, our understanding, or lack of it, as the case may be. So, for example, there are some things that we will all have this pain of not getting what we want, isn't it? That's painful. When we don't get what we want, we suffer. Yeah? I think so, yeah? Because people go to great pains to try to get what they want, to avoid that suffering. And it's not just as grown-ups, even when we're little babies. Or we want to be fed, or we want to be changed, or we want to cuddle, and we cry. We cry to get what we want, don't we? So we're in pain with it. We suffer because we haven't got whatever it is we want. When we're a baby, the wants are very, maybe you could even say they're not so much wants as needs, so that's a bit different. But still, there's pain attached there, there's suffering until you get what you want, and that's where the habit maybe comes in, and starts from. Or as an adult, our wants and get a bit more elaborate, let's say. I mean, yes, of course, there's still the needs that we need to eat and drink, but the kind of eating that we have gets more complicated, and, well, we don't just want a bowl of rice, but we then also want the vegetables, and then, maybe actually what we really want is a Michelin-starred restaurant meal, so there's no end to how complicated our wants can get, because we're never satisfied. We always want more or different. Well, I like that bread, but I don't like that bread. I like this coffee, but I don't like that coffee. So we're very... and then if we don't get precisely the right coffee that we want, devastation, It's like, okay, maybe I'm exaggerating somewhat, or maybe I'm just talking about myself here. But, it's... we can be very picky. And the more picky we are, the more we suffer. The more simple we are, the less we suffer. But anyway, yes. So we want the right food, the right drink. Could be the right drugs as well. People take drugs. I'm not just talking about medicinal ones. I'm talking about recreational ones. Or it can be something more abstract, like we want affection, or we want a new car, or a new partner. I mean, the list is endless. You could go on and on and on, you know. So, new pair of sneakers, whatever it is that we want. Then we can experience the pain of getting what we don't want. So we might not want, we probably don't want to be injured, we don't want injury, we don't want to be sick. But also, again, more abstractly, we don't want to be in debt. Do we? We definitely don't want to be in debt. We don't want lawsuits. There's so many, again, there's some quite sophisticated things that we don't want. And it causes us sufferings if we get them. If we meet that in our life, we suffer, don't we? Could be a parking ticket, could be anything, you know, quite simple, not so much suffering or a lot of suffering. Our partner leaves us, and, you know, things like that. Or we crash the car, you know, that we've worked so hard to get. And then there's also the pain of, okay, so we've got what we want. Let's say we've got the partner of our dreams, we've got the house of our dreams, we've got a lovely car, we've got everything is just perfect. But then there's the pain of losing it in some way, because everything that we have can be lost, isn't it? People spend a fortune on security, for example. Or, you know, putting alarms in their houses because they've got these things that they want to keep. Or the partner that we were so happy with, but now they've strayed off with somebody else. So these things are very common, and they all have pain attached. It could also be something like our career. Maybe we have a really good career that we're, you know, happy with and we worked hard for. But then something happens and we mess up, or somebody else comes along and they're better at it, or whatever. In some way we can lose our career. Again, it's not uncommon, is it? So all of these things that we might have worked very hard to get, but then we can lose. And even before we've lost them, there's still some suffering attached to them, even though they give us pleasure, like the new house or the new car. It's great, we're happy when we get that. But there is always that seed of suffering there because it's impermanent. It can be lost or taken, be stolen or broken. You know, nothing, it doesn't last forever, does it? So we're never completely happy, even when we're happy. There's that seed of suffering. So if you look at, well, okay, so how does that happen? What is the cause of this? And if we really look deeply into it, we can see that the root causes of this particular kind of, all these kinds of suffering is desire, wanting something, but a lot, you know, really desire, which can also lead to great attachment, you know, clinging on to things. And then that can cause a lot of pain. For example, if we get something that we want, or we need, or we want, and we're happy with it, but, you know, we realize that it's impermanent and that it may not last forever, then we're not going to suffer as much as if we expect it to last forever and always be the same. Because we're being more realistic in that way, aren't we? But if we really think, oh, we're going to have this forever, then we're creating our own suffering because of the way we're thinking. So the desire is one root cause, and then the opposite of that is aversion, what we don't want. And that can also lead to like rejection or denial or hatred even. You know, we can be quite aggressive about what we don't want or who we don't want. It might start off quite mild, oh, I don't quite like that person, but then it grows and you get more and more, and then people kill each other and stuff like this, you know. It's because of that rejection, the aversion might start as mild, and then it grows into multiplies into some major hatred. And we can see this all the time. You pick up any newspaper, you listen to any newscast, it's full of it. And so people wanting the attachment, the aversion, and then the root cause of those is the ignorance of not seeing how it really is. Both of them are rooted in this fundamental ignorance of not understanding how things are. Now, the word Dharma, it means truth, it means how things are, it means the Buddha's teachings of how things are. So ignorance is the opposite of that. Dharma is to dispel ignorance. Dharma is to cast light on ignorance, to give the light of understanding, and we call it enlightenment, don't we? But until we have that, then we have this mistaken way of looking at things, which causes us a lot of suffering, and globally as well, and individually. And one of the most difficult things to get over is the ignorance of thinking of ourselves as an independent self. This me, this I, and this mine. This is mine. You can't have that. That's my family, my friend, and so then anyone outside of that is other, enemy even can be, or not so sure, So it creates this dichotomy, straight away, this conflict between this so-called self, which doesn't really exist independently. But we'll go into that a bit more later. Suffice it to say that all these sufferings come about, they stem from a basic lack of understanding, and that's the same now as it ever was. Just the outer manifestations or trappings change because times change, but the actual root causes are the same. So we're still ignorant after all these years in a slightly different way, the wrapping or the trapping. And in our modern day life, which is, we talk about the technology connecting people. I'm not entirely sure it connects. I think it's a double-edged sword. But anyway, on some level it does connect us, but it also makes things, if there's something that's an ignorant viewpoint, can become very contagious instantly. Before, you might be ignorant, you might say something to somebody and it spreads, a bit of a rumour spreads, and maybe half a dozen people or a dozen people hear about it. Now, it can go global in seconds. It's pernicious, it's dangerous. So, and it can have, such suffering can lead to mass suffering on you could say an industrial scale, and have great global consequences. So we can think of examples like the imbalance it causes in our civilization, great imbalance, and some of them have always been, but some of them are quite new. For example, on the one hand you've got some people who are multi-billionaires, mega rich, and you've got some people who are dirt poor, have absolutely nothing. That imbalance is very unhealthy for everybody. Or you can think of the imbalance between black and white. You're starting to hear more about this now. Or different races, When I say black and white, I'm talking racially here. But it could be brown and yellow or whatever, all these colours nobody's actually black or white or yellow or pink even. But, people see others as different. Basically that's and people get afraid of difference, or they build up some fear of the unknown. you know. It could even be, I know some places, I used to live in Yorkshire, where people from the next village, 2 miles down the road, were considered foreigners, you know. Ooh, I'm not so sure about them. It's not only people on the other races, but other counties it can be. It can become extremely parochial. And or we can talk about between men and women, the gender imbalance, you know. We still have that. Not as much maybe, but still there for sure. So all of these things, things come from ignorance, of not understanding how things truly are. And if we talk about it on a global scale, you can also look at how this ignorance has led to the imbalance in nature. You know? First of all, and also war and peace. War causes so much suffering, but also because a lot of it is attached to greed. Why do people have wars? Why, you know, we want something, we want more of it. You know, we want more territory, or we want more thing, whatever it is, we want more. And we don't want the others to have it. So we have a war about it. You know? And then we wonder why part of the world is on fire. You know, the forest fires, for example, in California, and then other part of the world are having floods, devastating floods, people dying, climate crises and species extinctions. So this is very prevalent now, isn't it? On a massive scale, on a really an unprecedented scale. I'm hearing the word unprecedented so many times. It's unprecedented how many times we hear the word unprecedented, because it hasn't happened. Certainly not in recorded history. And certainly not in recorded human history, because we're to blame here, you know, or not 100%, but a lot of what's going on is because of our ignorance. I don't think anybody sets out to cause harm particularly. They'll be just going after what they want and not looking to see how it causes harm, or even caring about how. They're just focused on what they want. So what to do? Akon Rinpoche, whose photograph is on the mantelpiece there, the second from the right. Akon Rinpoche is our founder. And one of the many wise things he said and lived by, he said that the real challenge is to have balance and stability within continuous change. Because things are changing all the time. Whenever we lived and wherever we lived, change is the one thing that doesn't change. It's always changing. So if we can maintain our balance and stability throughout that, whatever that change is. So that now brings us to the third noble truth. Now the third noble truth is the cessation of suffering. Is it possible to get out of it or alleviate this suffering? And that was really the reason why the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree and meditated for so long, not just under the Bodhi tree, but for years and years of his life. Is it possible to escape this suffering or to alleviate it? Is there a way out? Well, the short answer is yes. And the reason we can say that with certainty is because the Buddha himself discovered that. And then he was able to guide many other people to discover that yes, there is a way out of suffering and towards self-liberation, to liberate oneself from all of this ignorance, which is the cause of suffering. Right now, it's like we're stumbling around in the darkness of ignorance. And yet our mind has the same potential, exactly the same potential as the mind of the Buddha. We're no different in that way, in terms of potential. The difference is that he realized it. He realized his full potential, and we are yet to do that. Maybe we're on the road to doing that, but we're still not there. But we have the wherewithal, we have what we need. But we have to use it, of course. So it's not going to just fall into our lap. We have the same potential to awaken in the light of wisdom and compassion. That is our true nature. That's who we truly are. We are not this ignorance. The ignorance is like something that's kind of landed on us. It's like a bug or something that's landed, something that's dust that's landed on us. So we can clear that, we can clean that, and discover our true nature. But it doesn't just fall into our lap. It's not that easy, because first we have to clear away our habitual ignorance, our habitual way of thinking. And it's not easy, because it is habitual, it's become a habit over. And if you understand past lives and reincarnation, then it's not just the habits of one lifetime, it's the habits of many lifetimes. But even if you're not so fait with multiple lives, even if you just consider one life, we have habits from the time we're born. So first we have to clear away these mistaken ways of thinking, because they're obstacles in our path. It's like if you're going to set out, you need to clear the way. And that actually now brings us to the path. So we need to clear away the obstacles and these mistaken ways of thinking, and at the same time cultivate our natural positive qualities, which we were born with. We do have wisdom, we do have compassion. We can see this in the behavior of very young children. They care about each other. Sometimes they care more than the adults. Maybe we can become more selfish sometimes as we grow older. So if we can cultivate our positive qualities, then that's like giving us the fuel to travel along the path. And then that becomes the fourth noble truth, is the path, the way in which to live our lives. Excuse me. So we're very lucky, because we have the Buddha and other great beings who have led lives and become totally enlightened and been great bodhisattvas who have helped thousands and thousands of people. So we can look at, for example, the Buddha's life, and we can see it as a blueprint, as an example, or a map even. You could say a map showing the way to self-liberation. It's called self-liberation because nobody can do it for us. But the Buddha pointed the way. So we're very fortunate to have that. But each of us has our own inner journey. We don't have to go anywhere. We can, but we don't have to go anywhere. We can stay in one place. It's an inner journey. It's a journey into our mind. This mind that we don't really know that much about. I think of it's a bit like, when we think of planet Earth, we mainly see the countries and what's on the surface. We still know very little about the oceans. And yet the oceans are 2/3 of the Earth, aren't they? And I think it's a bit like that with the mind. We see our bodies, we take quite a lot of care of our bodies. Not much care about our mind. We don't even know our mind. And then we get surprised when people become mentally ill. Even young people now, there's a lot of mental illness, isn't there, and unbalance, because the planet's unbalanced. Everything's out of whack. So, we all have our own inner journey. Nobody can do it for us. And then we need to start, before you set off on any journey, we need to start by clearing the way, clearing the obstructions that block our path. So what are these? We're not talking about physical obstructions, we're talking about mental obstructions. In Tibetan, the word is klesha, but what it actually means is like mind poison or wrong ways of seeing, big misunderstandings. And these all come from the mind poisons. They come from the ignorance that manifests as desire and aversion, aggression, clinging, all of this stuff, greed, pride, and all the other selfish behaviors that stem from this clinging to the fundamentally mistaken idea of an independently existing self. I, me, mine versus other. This is hard to get to the bottom of, because we're so habituated to thinking in that way. So, we can start by looking into it. We have to look into it, because when we do that, we start to see that it's true that all this suffering, whether we're talking on a personal, individual level, or we're talking on a global level, it all stems from this. That's the truth of the matter. So the sooner we start looking into it, because the only thing that can get us out of it is understanding. Understanding is the opposite of ignorance, isn't it? So it's not by saying, oh, Buddha said that, and so that must be true, and okay, so I'll say that's it. But if we don't have the understanding, it means nothing. So we have to use our intelligence. We have to use this mind. This mind is powerful. It's incredible. It's capable of anything, good or bad. So if we point it in the right direction, and we know what the right direction is, then we can penetrate into the truth through the ignorance. It dispels through understanding. Once you've seen something, you can't unsee it, can you? You've learned something. You can't then pretend that you haven't learned it. So just that very fact of seeing something, how it is, bit by bit, it's not all going to happen in one fell swoop. It happens in stages. So everything takes you to the next level. I mean, it's the same even in an ordinary worldly way, in an academic way, let's say. You have to start with one thing, say the alphabet, then you learn how to read, and then you can read a book, and then you can read Shakespeare, and you can't go straight to Shakespeare. You have to go stage by stage, and each step takes you to the next step. So, as we progress, we start to get glimpses of understanding. And as we get glimpses, there arises an inner peace, a naturally arising compassion. The more we see our connection with others, then we have this sense of being all together, kind of all part of the same network of existence. And then that gives us greater compassion, because we know that other people are suffering the same way we do, maybe a lot more. So, and not just people, but animals, nature, everything. Our hearts start to open, our minds and hearts start to open in the light of understanding, not because we want to live in La La Land or some Walt Disney sort of kind of happy, but because we see the connection, we feel the connection. And so that leads to an outer peace, peace around us, peace in our relationships with others. And we start to feel and acknowledge the interdependence of all things, of all beings, that our connection with all life forms and the planet that is our common home. We all live on this same planet, whether we live on this side or that side. It's all the same planet, isn't it? Mother Earth. And I think also we start to see Mother Earth as a living being, not just a lump of rock whizzing around the galaxy, but a living being, a mother. She gives us everything. And what do? We're the most selfish children ever. So when we see that it's our common home on earth that sustains us, Then, if we look around us today and we see the state of the planet today, and the living beings on it that are suffering on such a grand scale, surely that indicates that the need for Buddha Dharma, the truth of the Buddha's teachings, is more relevant and more true than ever. We can also look at the four foundations. Now, some of you may have studied the four foundations, some of you not. But basically, the four foundations are the sort of foundation of the Buddhist thought, and they're common to all schools of Buddhism. You know, whether it's in Japanese or Chinese or Indian, or every school of Buddhism has these four foundations. It's like the building bricks. So we have to understand these good foundations, that we're not different from our environment, but we depend on it. Everything depends on everything else. Every breath we take, we're taking from the environment, aren't we? We're taking from the air around us, we take it and it gives us life. If it's pure air, if it's polluted air, it might give us death. And then it depends on the quality of the air we breathe. So is it polluted or is it clean? If it's polluted, who polluted it? You know? Generally speaking, it's human beings. And the same is true of our earth. Whether the earth is full of minerals and goodness, or whether it's completely depleted, degraded. And the same is true of our waters, whether the waters are clean and life-giving or poisoned. You know, with all this rubbish sewage and all sorts that we pollute our rivers with, and our oceans and our plastics and all of this stuff. So to see how the Buddha Dharma can guide us through the 21st century problems that threaten not only us as individuals, but all life on this planet that's our home. Let's just have a brief look at the primary foundations. So the first foundation is that of precious human life. So why is it precious? Because it gives us the wherewithal to act wisely, intelligently, and compassionately. We have these qualities. Whether we use them or not, or develop them or not, is another story. But we have those qualities. And if we use them well, we can act wisely, intelligently, and compassionately for the well-being of all beings and the planet. The second of the four foundations is that of change, death, impermanence, how things change. So we need to accept that things change, because they do. It's so important to see ourselves as part of this natural cycle. All physical things, whatever it is, it ages, it withers, it dies. Whether you're talking about a person or a flower. Our bodies are, now the season that we're in right now is autumn. I think of ourselves, our bodies like leaves on a tree. They change from being vibrant green to going golden and brown, and then they fall off and they fall into the earth and are recycled into the earth, aren't they? And then that feeds the tree that blooms again in spring. So just so our consciousness is reborn. Our bodies die and our consciousness is reborn in a new body. And the type of body that it's reborn into is according to our karma. And karma, cause and result, is the third of the four foundations. So karma basically means actions. So how we act in this life creates the conditions for our birth in our next life. As well as affecting the current life, it also affects lives to come. So it creates the conditions. This is actually not that difficult to understand. I mean, if we take a worldly example, supposing we're studying at school or at university or wherever we're studying, and supposing we waste our time and we don't really study, we mess around and we don't study at all, then how is that going to affect the next year? We're going to have to stay behind, or we're going to get expelled, or something like that will happen. On the other hand, if we study well, then we'll progress to the next level. So it's a little bit like that. What I mean is that what we do, our actions, affect the outcome, don't they? Whether we're talking about in one life or multiple lives. So to see it in that simple way, I think is not so difficult. So, but it doesn't, we are recycled. We are recycled. The actions in this life create the conditions for our birth in the next life, and we are recycled according to our conduct, according to what actions we took, what we did. It doesn't happen by chance. It happens because of the cause of our actions. Therefore, we need to embrace responsibility for our actions, because it means we can affect our outcome. We're not like leaves, really. We're not like leaves just randomly blowing on the wind. Things happen because of causes of our actions. So if we take responsibility for our actions and we use it wisely to develop ourselves for the sake of all beings, then the outcome will be very positive. Now the fourth foundation is that of the futility of samsara. Samsara means like worldly life, the general kind of worldly life. So Buddha Dharma gives us the path to awaken from the delusion of this thinking that we're an independently existing self. So through investigation, study, contemplation, meditation, all of these things, we can realize that our true nature and connection is with all beings and to our long-suffering planet. We can find this out for ourselves. We can not just find it out intellectually, but we actually feel it. So that's just a brief look at the four foundations to see how they work within our modern world. So now we're talking about the 21st century. I think we look at a few home truths about the 21st century. So for the last, more than 100 years, probably a couple of 100 years, we've made amazing examples of, amazing advances in all kinds of things, but particularly in science, different sciences, biology, technology, epidemiology, all the ologies. But all these advances can be used for good or ill, depending on the motivation and the application of whoever's using them. All knowledge is a double-edged sword, isn't it? It can cut both ways. Drugs can be used to heal or harm. Depending on who's got them, who's using them. Is it for world health or big pharma wealth? Are those in positions of power driven by altruistic motivation to benefit all beings, or are they driven by greed, insatiable greed, to amass riches for themselves? Because it's the latter that causes the suffering, this gross imbalance. which ultimately destroys everything in its path, including Mother Earth. If we continue the way we've been going, if we continue to plunder and degrade this earth, we are literally biting the hand that feeds us. We suffer. And that's what's happening. The chickens are coming home to roost. So, we need to act individually and we need to act universally. We need to check our own motivation. This is what we can do. This is first and foremost. It's always easy to blame others, but first we need to look at what we as individuals, how we are, how we're doing. We need to purify what needs to be purified, our lack of understanding. We don't do things ignorantly on purpose, we do it because we're ignorant. So we need to purify our lack of understanding so that we can see clearly. Like I said, it's like the dirt. If you lived in a house with dirty windows, then everything through those windows looks distorted. So we need to clear our windows, clean our windows. And then when we can see more clearly, we can make the right choices in leading our lives and in electing our leaders. We should use that as well. Very important. And then if we think more about what do we actually need? Never mind about what we want. First of all, what do we actually need? And our primary needs for sustainable life are actually very simple, but most precious. It's the good earth, the rich earth that grows our food, the pure water that we need to live, and the clean air to breathe. That's what we really need. Yet these are the very things, the invaluable resources that we're completely sacrificing in pursuit of our desires. And the efforts to get all these complicated things that we want more and more of, we're sacrificing what we actually need to live. And that, whether you're rich or poor, if the air's polluted, you're all going to suffer. If the waters are poisoned, we're all going to suffer. We've depleted the earth, we've poisoned the waters, polluted the air, and it's time to wake up. Because we're right there on the brink now. So we need to have a change of direction. In fact, it's we have to let go of some of these complicated wants in order to be able to have what we need to sustain life. And we need to wake up. The signs were there years ago, and we ignored them. They were ignored. If we had acted then, if we had acted 50 years or 30 years ago, things would not have deteriorated to the point that they're at now. So, I'd like to illustrate this last point by showing you a short video. It's actually an extract from a film, a documentary of a music festival that I was involved with. This was before I was a nun. We're talking 30 years ago. Some of you weren't even born. But at that time, I was one of a bunch of people. We were very concerned about the rainforest being burnt and depleted, so that people could have more beef. It was predominantly in Brazil, but other rainforests as well. So for raising cattle, so they were burning the rainforests. And then another cause that was very close to my heart was that of the elephants, which were being hunted for their ivory, and they were almost extinct. At that time they were really almost coming towards extinction. And so we put this festival on, and I'd like to just show you a very short excerpt from it, so you'll get hopefully you'll get some understanding that this is not new what we're experiencing now. So at this time I used to be called Jackie Glass before I was Ani Rinchen Khandro, and I also had this kind of video company called Reel to Reel. And so we filmed the concert, and we were just young people, you know, and we got together with a bunch of friends, and we invited people from musicians, anybody who would want to support this cause. And then the money from it was to go between two charities, one of which is called the Earth Love Fund, and that was predominantly money for to protect the rainforests. And the other was Elephants, which was to protect the elephants.
That's just so that people can buy jewelry or ornaments made of ivory, made of elephant's teeth. There's been rather a wonderful poem written by Jackie Glass, who is from Reel to Reel, who put on this marvelous event today, which I'd like to read to you. It's called An Elephant's Call. They came for my father, my husband, my son. They came for my brothers 3 and murdered them cruelly in front of my eyes, hacking their tusks for a fee. They came with their guns and their spears and their traps. My mother was caught in one, but having no tusks, they left her to die. 3 weeks in the burning sun. Her body is now one of many white husks that litter the forest floor. This place, which once was our home, is our graveyard, filled with the dying herds, raw. I'm afraid of the gun, the spear, the trap, and the greed that would kill us all. and steal our ivory tusks for ornaments to hang on a rich man's wall. Imagine your family killed for their teeth. Imagine your race's end. For us, it isn't imagined extinction. For us, it isn't pretend. I beg you to put down your guns, spears, and traps before you've slaughtered us all. I beg you to stop senseless ivory trade and hear this elephant's call.
Ladies and gentlemen, direct from the US of A, let's hear it for a living legend, Edwin Starr.
1, 2, 3, 4. It's not the ball, y'all. All right. Well. Oh, boy. Ooh, oh, Lord. All right. I despise. It means destruction to innocent lives. War means peace. The violence of one time. There's still one fight. And who's there now? I said war. Yeah. What is it good for? Nothing. War. Yeah. What is it good for? Every for mankind. The thought of war blows my mind. War has caused the rest in the younger generation. Induction and destruction. Who the hell wants to die? War. Yeah. What is it good for? Absolutely. Says
you're dealing with kiddies, definitely look at life differently and take it more seriously. You think about the future, because it's their future. And the rainforest problem and the destruction of rare species of animal, it's nothing new. You know, since the war particularly, it's all got far worse, of course. It's just recently everyone seems to have started to care. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun, do-do-do-do. Here comes the sun, and I'll say it's alright. Little darling, the smiles returning to the faces. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun, do-do-do-do. Here comes the sun, and I'll say it's alright.
Our aim from the Earth Love Fund is to raise funds and awareness to help stop the destruction of the world's rainforests. For this is the most crucial ecological issue facing us today on the planet. The rainforests are disappearing from the Earth at the rate of 1 acre per second, or 20 football pitches per minute. And the indigenous tribes whose homes have always been in the forest are being divided, burnt out, and even murdered. Our record is dedicated to the work of Chico Mendes, a Brazilian rubber tapper in the Amazon, who was brutally murdered last Christmas by those seeking huge profit and financial gain. I think we're going to show you the video now of Spirit of the Forest. Thanks for all coming.
Das matas jamais vão cortar o coração da árvore da vida, Nativo, racuxi, cavaé, pataxó, tororó, ticuna, canela, caranja, tucano, chavante, juruna, guarani.
In the balance, there lies our fate.
Turn round before it's too late.
Never break the spirit of the forest. They'll never cut the heart from the tree of life. They'll never break the spirit of the forest. They'll never break the spirit of the forest.
So that was filmed in 1990, 31 years ago. And everybody that took part in that gave their time and talents and resources free. Hotels gave us rooms to put people up in. Airlines gave us fares for people to travel to. There was quite a groundswell of people willing to support these ideas, and what you've seen there is only a fraction because it was a day-long event, and so we made 3 one-hour programs, so there was actually 3 hours of footage filmed over the course of the whole day and right up into the, I think it was about 11 o'clock at night we finished. Unfortunately, the council who owned the building, the venue where it was, were somewhat less supportive. They almost pulled the plug. I think they were worried the hippies would take over the asylum or something. You know, we were just a bunch of young people doing this. But you can see some of the famous faces that were supporting us, and that's just a fraction. So things have moved on. The rainforest is now a fraction of what it was then. There's very little left. We called it the lungs of the world. The rainforest are the lungs of the world. And now the lungs is like just a little bit left. Climate disruption is even more frequent and severe. Wildlife species are more and more extinct. People are displaced. Refugees coming because they can't live in a war zone or a place where there's drought or famine. And they're dying of famine, whatever. The evidence is all around us. And we can't ignore it anymore. You know, we've been caring about it to some degree for some time, but now it's become such a crisis. So for the sake of this and future generations, and not only that, but if we understand karma, cause and effect, if we understand multiple lives, we then understand that we too will be coming back to experience whatever we've done. You know, we will have to reap what we sow. So it's not only others, we have to bring it right home. We have to take responsibility to act wisely and effectively on 2 fronts. The inner world, that is our mind and heart, what we can really concentrate on ourselves and how to break out of this shell of ignorance. And then the outer world, that is our environment. Actually, it's all part of the same thing. There's no dividing line between this so-called self and then the world outside. We're all completely interconnected. And on that note, I'd like to finish with a few insights by His Holiness, the 17th Jawa Karmapa, Ujin Trini Dorji, and which we can use. I'll just read them. There's a few reflections that I've written down from here. He's got a wonderful book called Interconnection. It's all about this. And life, embracing life in our global society, how to live. I definitely recommend you to get it, Interconnection. Anyway, here's a couple of extracts. And then, once I've read them, I think we'll just sit with it and meditate for not so long because we're kind of coming towards the end of our time, but maybe just 5 or 10 minutes meditation. So, get yourselves in a good position to meditate. And so whether you're sitting on the floor or in a chair, you need to straighten your back. If you're in a chair, best to bring your body forward so that you can put your feet flat on the ground. That's it. And, solidly planted and your back nice and straight. So anyway, I'm not going to give any guidance. I'm going to allow His Holiness come up to give the guidance, and we'll just contemplate what he said. So he says, the health of our planet depends on us recognizing how interdependence works in the natural world, and especially how human actions, greatly amplified by technological advances, interact with other forces. On a personal level, our ability to find lasting happiness also depends on understanding how interdependence works within our own life and relationships. In short, the well-being of our global society, as well as our individual happiness, depend on our learning to live fully in tune with their interdependence. Our actions change the world. How we act depends on the intentions and actions that form within us. Bringing together the right environment that forms within allows us to respond well to the environment around us. Inner conditions and outer conditions interact. Their interplay creates the reality in which we live. Interconnection is not just a theory, but something we can all experience. Feel it in your every breath. Enact it in your every step. Bring your most noble aspirations out into the world. Share them with others and take action. I too join my aspiration with yours, so that together we can serve as conditions for all beings and this planet to flourish. May all beings be happy and create the causes of happiness. May we be free from suffering and from creating the causes of suffering. May we attain that noble happiness that can never be tainted by suffering. May we have universal, impartial compassion, free from bias towards friends or others. Okay, so I'm afraid we're running out of time now, but let's first of all dedicate the merit of our practice today. There's a short prayer at the bottom of the page. It says dedication of merit, and in English it says, through the wholesomeness of this practice, may all the mental defilements be overcome, and may all beings be liberated from the ocean of samsara, stirred by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. And then we can recite the Tibetan together. O sonam de tamche sekpani, Topne nye pedanam pamchene, Jegana jibala drupai, Sipe sole doa doa sho. Okay, so I hope this has been of some use to you and at least given you some food for thought. And maybe to mull it over, to things you have to put effort into these things and really go into them for yourself. See, is it true or not, and if it is, how to act accordingly. If you have any questions, you can ask me, but in terms of online presence, if anybody wants to, I can't guarantee to answer them, but if you want to try and ask me anything, then feel free to email me at our email address, and it's on our website, so I don't need to recite it. But yes, please go ahead. And if you're here, well, maybe actually in a little while, if you want to ask questions, you can. But I think we better just close for now and let Marcus have a break. So thank you for coming, everybody, and I hope it's been of use.